You can be afraid of pursuing the things that you want to pursue, right? And that's very common. You want to get your fear behind you, pushing you. And so what you want to be is more afraid of not pursuing your goals than you are of pursuing them. It's very, very helpful.
Hi, and welcome to the ENTJ podcast. I'm Dan, an ENTJ on the Myers-Briggs personality test. And today, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about why I started this channel and why I stopped this channel. I haven't stopped this channel, but you'll notice I haven't uploaded a lot recently, and it actually has to do with two things: fear, procrastination, and how those combine, which is not a typical thing that an ENTJ has to deal with, but I think it's going to be useful to talk about. So let's talk about why I started this channel. I started it after I'd moved to Sweden during COVID from Australia. My third video describes that process and some of the challenges that took place. And once I'd been here in Sweden and met new friends, set up the house here, life became more comfortable. The routine was structured. I was asking myself, okay, what's next? Now, I'm a high school teacher. That's where I spend a lot of my time and energy. I also have other side ventures as well, but I don't want to be a high school teacher forever. I love it, but I want to push myself to be, I guess, the best version of myself. Where is my potential? And I see that perhaps in psychology. I have a huge passion for psychology and personality. I'd love to do some research in this area one day, perhaps pursue a PhD, perhaps kind of provide professional development to teachers and students to understand themselves and understand others. So is this something that I would be good at? Is this something that people would want to listen to me about? Well, that's why I started this channel. In some ways, it was a way for me to test the waters. To give you the context, and I'm going to try and do this quickly because you don't really want to listen to a massively long video about my chronic fatigue, but I had chronic fatigue after 2014. I visited 24 countries in 1 year when I was living and working in England. It was an awesome time, but I pushed myself to burnout, achieving the goal of traveling. And it was a really difficult time in my life. I think I opened my immune system up to some sort of chronic infections which were diagnosed and treated, but it took a long time. It took many doctors. Going to work every day was super, super difficult. I was really at the lowest point of my life, and I'm really glad that I'm not there in that place anymore. I want to talk more about my experience with chronic fatigue and how I was able to overcome that, and also what I've learned from that. Because very briefly, connecting this to the cognitive functions, when you're stressed or when you're tired, you tend to use your dominant cognitive functions exclusively. So when I was teaching, interacting with colleagues, it was all TE, no FI. But I'd never wish this experience on anyone, and I would hate to have to go through it again, but I learned so much from that experience. I learned some of the negatives of my personality, and it really helped balance me as a person. It's very cliche, but it developed character, right? There's some value that can come from suffering, and that's certainly what I've experienced. But leading up to my last video, it was about this time in February where I received promotion at my work over here in Sweden. New opportunities, new responsibilities, and actually new fears. You see, I knew what it was like to become fatigued. I knew I at least had that potential, and I didn't want it to happen again. And the fact that my YouTube channel wasn't exponentially growing like I wanted it to, I decided to take a step back, to give myself a bit of space, to relax, take an opportunity to really step into this new role without any fear of becoming chronically fatigued. It's funny, I think a lot of people during COVID came to a realization that the reason they weren't achieving these long-term goals was not because of a lack of time. And when they had that extra time, they stepped into watching Netflix and playing video games. It's the latter for me. So when I had this extra time that I was leaving for myself, I wasn't using it for productive purposes. It wasn't actually used to pursue my new role and better manage the responsibilities. I spent it by playing video games. And video games can be really satisfying while you're in them, especially for TE users like the ENTJ. You can achieve goals, you can win in the video game, you can better yourself, but step outside of that space and it's meaningless. I mean, it has no real world value. Video game addiction is something that many young people are facing because it's a substitute. You can substitute success in the digital world for success in the real world. And success in the real world is a lot harder. So I'm thinking about fear. And it was actually Jordan Peterson who helped me realize what exactly was going on. You see, I had this fear in front of me, which was kind of stopping me from pushing forward. You know, fear is kind of like a pushing force. In this case, it was backwards. But I think naturally an ENTJ, at least for me, from a young age, I had fear behind me. Let me explain this. My worst fear, and I remember having this vivid memory of me imagining myself on my deathbed. And what was my regret? It wasn't living up to the potential that I had. My potential was here. I never reached it. I never took those risks. I never took those opportunities. That thought scared me. I wanted to be the best version of myself. I wanted to take what life had to offer and use it. And that kind of fear was propelling me into the future and causing me to take the risks and causing me to sometimes fail, but it was okay because, well, let's take the next opportunity. Instead of a fear that's in front of you, you see a fear that's in front of you pushes you back. It stops you taking opportunities. And I guess that's why many people procrastinate. You know, you could stuff up in this role and you could start to face your own inadequacy. That's difficult to do. Maybe you don't feel good enough. There's this idea of imposter syndrome, which perhaps I was experiencing to a limited degree. But I'd like to challenge you today. Where is the fear in your life? Is it behind you? Is it pushing you forward in a positive way? Or is it in front of you, kind of repressing you? Oh, and one more thing. I recently did an interview with an INFP. Really awesome to talk to MBTItime. She runs a YouTube channel and a very successful Instagram page. I'm going to link that discussion in the description below. We talked about the ENTJ dynamics, misconceptions, and how they relate to the INFP personality. So, till next time, thank you so much for supporting this channel and watching this video. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'll see you later.